Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Well, hi there and welcome once again to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. John Scholes, your host, and joining me momentarily, Lior Samfiru, employment lawyer from EmploymentLawyer.ca. Going to fill you in with all the knowledge over the next half hour. On the show each week, we shatter the myths and misconceptions about employment law and fill you in, make you smarter when it comes to workplace rights. Several different ways you can reach out to Lior, by the way, anytime, even outside the half hour of the show. Phone number, always first, 1-888-861-4555. ask@employmentlawyer.ca. That's the correct email, and you also have EmploymentLawyer.ca, just the website you can use anytime. What you need to know about working notice, big topic, and we're going to fill you in just on the other side of our first break. That'll be the main topic for today. Get to some phone calls from our radio shows, which, by the way, here in the GTA, we ask you to tune in, enjoy for the entire hour Sundays at 1 p.m. on News Talk 1010. In fact, we encourage you to phone into the show, and maybe your question will appear on this show at a later date. But we'll get to all that in just a bit. Lior, good to see you, pal. We always start off with the case of the day or a week that was. What has been happening for you?
Hey, John, great to be here as always to talk about employment law. We're here to educate again everyone about your job, about your workplace, about the things that you need to know if things don't go well at work. Sometimes things are going great. Sometimes you don't have issues or questions, but other times things may happen that may give you a pause and you have to think, well, wait a second. Is what my boss is doing legal? Do I have rights? Can I do something about it? Well, on this show, we tell you what to do if you lost your job or worried about losing your job, if your pay has been changed, if you've been put on a layoff, whatever the issue, if it touches on work, you'll know what to do. And of course, I'm not just some guy on TV. I do this for a living. So if you have any questions beyond the show, we'll give you the phone number and email address so that you can reach out. We can have a private chat and you can have even more of your questions answered. But we know what we want to do, so I say let's go ahead and do it. Let me tell you about a situation that came across my desk over the past week or so. I spoke with a gentleman who had worked for the same company for right around 16 years. That's a long time. Recently, the plant that he was working in was not doing very well. Business was a lot slower. And finally, he and his colleagues were called into a meeting and they were told, listen, we don't really have any more work right now. We're going to put everyone here on a temporary layoff. But good news is we're going to be selling the plant. And when the new owner comes in, there's going to be plenty of work for everyone. So just hang in there. We'll call you back as soon as we can. Well, fast forward 4 months later, still nothing happened, still off work. And he finally called me. And he wanted to know really, how long do I have to wait? There's been no news about the sale of a business. I am not back at work. How long do I have to wait? So here's the answer to that. He doesn't have to wait, even though there's a legitimate business reason for him being put on a temporary layoff. This is not a situation where his employer was picking on him or was trying to hurt him. Not at all. The business was slow, so the employer felt like it needed to put someone on a temporary layoff. Despite that, there is no right to put an employee on a temporary layoff. The law does not distinguish between good business reasons or bad business reasons. The law simply says you cannot put someone on a temporary layoff. And if you do, that employee can treat that as a termination and get severance. So you don't have to wait a month, 2 months, 4 months, or any number of months. You can treat that layoff as a termination of your employment now, get your severance, and move on. So business reasons aside, you may tell me, well, I believe the company, they're struggling, and that's fine. If you want to wait, you can, but you don't have to. The law does not care about those reasons. The law simply says if your employment is now not happening, if you're on ice, so to speak, you can get that severance. It's up to you.
As we said off the top, Lior, you and I have been doing radio together in addition to TV for over 10 years, if you can believe it, across the country, and more importantly, more focus here in the GTA. News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. You can catch a show, Lior and I doing that. Phone calls, we get a ton of them, great questions. We like to field those on air and then replay them back here during this show. Let's get to our first phone call from the day, Lior, and talk about it a little bit.
I worked for a financial institution as a commission salesperson for 14 years. I was asked to leave the firm. It was somewhat of a political thing. Now, there was no severance. There was nothing that was offered at all. It was just, thanks very much, off you go. Is that something that I might be entitled to receive something?
They considered you to be, quote unquote, an independent contractor?
Yes, that was their interpretation.
How long ago? When did this happen?
About 17 months ago.
John, this is very straightforward. You do not work for a company for 14 years like this person is and still somehow be an independent contractor. That's nonsense. He has been misclassified. He clearly was an employee. He worked for them, did sales for 14 years. The law considers him to be an employee. Then that means he's owed severance. Same with you at home. If you have a regular job for a significant amount of time, I don't really care if the company says you're a contractor. I don't care if you sign a piece of paper that says you're a contractor. The law comes in and says you are an employee. You've been misclassified. Happens all the time. And why is that important? It's important, John, because now he's owed severance because he's an employee. Of course, now it's time to answer the question, well, how much severance does he get? For that, I'm going to take you to our severance calculator. You can do that at home yourself. You just go to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Again, pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Use the severance calculator. We'll do that right now. And let's see how much severance he gets because he's an employee. So he's in a sales role, 14 years, 47 years of age. Company says you don't get any severance. Wrong. You see in the bottom there, he gets up to 16 months of pay. 16 months of pay. That's a lot of severance. That's why we have the calculator. That's why we have laws that says you cannot be misclassified. So if you think you're not owed severance, go to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca and find out exactly what you're owed.
Exactly what Lior mentioned. It's free and anonymous as well. So much more can be gleaned off that website as well, pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Okay, main topic, time for that after break. What you need to know about working notice. We'll drill down into that. First, we'll get to our first break. The phone number as we take that break, 1-888-861-4555 and ask@employmentlawyer.ca. We'll continue. This is Ask a Lawyer here on CP24.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Okay, we're back. Ask a Lawyer. Thank you so much for hanging in. John Scholes here and Lior Samfiru, available anytime at employmentlawyer.ca. Ask@employmentlawyer.ca, the email. And that phone number, write it down. Keep it 1-888-861-4555. Okay, Lior, main topic time. That is what you need to know about working notice. Let's spend a little bit of time dissecting this one. The first question when we get to these topics is the big one, the obvious one. What is working notice determination, pal?
So we know about severance, of course. We know that when an employer lets an employee go, severance has to be paid. But wait a second, not so fast necessarily, because an employer often has another option instead of providing severance. So what an employer can do is to provide advance notice of the termination. And if the employer provides that advance notice, we call that working notice, then they may not have to pay severance or as much severance at the end of that. So once we know how much severance an employee gets, let's say it's 6 months or 18 months or something else, that employer can provide that amount by way of notice. So employee, I'm telling you today that 12 months from now, you no longer have a job. I'm giving you 12 months working notice of the termination of your employment. The idea is that that amount of notice then counts towards the severance. Now, the reality is that most employers prefer to not have that happen. They want the employee to leave right away. But an employer does have the option, and certainly sometimes does, provide notice to reduce those severance obligations.
It's interesting, though, because an employee at that point would have this dark cloud looming large overhead. What if they don't want to continue working once they've received that notice? What happens?
Well, certainly I've heard that often. Well, employer gives me a 12 months notice. I don't want to work for 12 months when I know they're letting me go. So I want to leave now and just get my severance. The reality is that if you leave before your last date, you're considered to have resigned. And if you've resigned, you're not owed any severance. And I know that might sound strange because the company just told you you're going to be gone. except they told you you're going to be gone at a point in time down the road. And if you decide to leave in the meantime, you're considered to have resigned. So it's certainly something that you don't want to do. Now, you may be able to talk to your employer and say, hey, employer, how about I leave now and instead you pay me this amount? But ultimately, if the company says, no, you have to stay here until a certain date, if you leave, you can, but that's a resignation, meaning no more severance is going to be owed at that point.
So from the employee, I guess the employer's standpoint as well, at the end of that working notice period, is there severance still owed, additional severance, or no?
So in my experience, John, I've been doing this a very long time. The amount of notice that the employer provided is still not sufficient in order to eliminate that severance obligation. That means that at the end of that notice period, you're still going to be owed severance. The vast majority of time, the employer simply does not provide enough severance. Maybe the employee is owed 12 months and they're provided with 5 months notice. So that means that the employer has to make up the difference at the end of the working notice period. That's why you want to understand what you're going to be owed at the end before you quit. You can, of course, go to EmploymentLawyer.ca and use our severance calculator. The amount of severance that you see there can be provided to you by way of notice. So always a good idea, especially if you're asked to sign something in return for getting this notice, to not sign anything, but to call me. And of course, always call me at the end of that notice period, because you may well be entitled to some substantial amount of severance.
Again, this week we're talking about everything you need to know about working notice. So does it depend? I mean, how much severance or working notice should an employee get? Is it individual for everybody?
So yes, the amount of notice or severance that the person gets is based on individual factors: your age, your position, and the length of your employment. So your age is going to be different than someone else's. Your length of employment is going to be different. That's why also anytime you hear about, well, I get a week per year or 2 weeks per year, that's wrong. Not at all, not even close. And it could be as much as 24 months of severance or notice that you are owed. So the amount of notice that you're owed can be given to you by way of severance or vice versa. Again, that's why we created the EmploymentLawyer.ca, so you can get a quick, accurate, and free assessment of what you're owed, either notice or severance. So always the first place you check out if you find out that your position is coming to an end.
So finally, let me ask you this. You have someone who's on working notice. It could be 6 months, could be 24 months, whatever. During that period, can the employer make changes to the job? Can they fire them during that working notice period? What happens if they do, or at least try?
The reality is that if your employer gives you working notice, they have to maintain the status quo during that period of time. Just like in regular time, an employer can't just demote you, they can't mistreat you, they can't change your pay or your hours. The same thing happens during that notice period. Your employer cannot legally make those changes. If they do, that could be a constructive dismissal. So just because you're on working notice of termination doesn't mean that the employer has carte blanche to do whatever it wants. Not at all. They should maintain your pay, your salary, your commissions, all your hours, all components of your compensation. If they don't just walk out of there. Don't just say, forget it, I'm gone. Give me a call. We have to do this right. But you would absolutely have recourse in that situation.
You want to learn more anytime, that website's always available to you, EmploymentLawyer.ca. Use it. It's free, anonymous, of course. You'll also find links across the country, our long-running radio shows, Lior, including right here in the GTA, News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. As I mentioned, always encouraged to call into the show and be that third voice on air. We'd love to get your calls. Let's play our second phone call from the radio show. Back right now, Lior. See what happens.
I've worked overtime many times, and my employer refuses to pay me because he says it's a time management issue and that I should be completing my work quicker. But I've struggled with the work. I feel I'm doing it competently, but it's just taking me longer. Am I entitled to overtime?
It's a great question. It's something we've addressed before on the show, and the answer is actually very straightforward. Yes, you're entitled to overtime pay if you've worked the overtime. It doesn't matter that the company doesn't agree. It doesn't matter that the company didn't ask you to work. It doesn't even matter if the company told you don't work overtime. But if you did work, if you had to work to get the job done, the company has to pay it. In Ontario, overtime is any time after 44 hours a week. You have to get time and a half, whether you're salary or hourly. But just because the company doesn't want to pay or doesn't think you should be working the overtime, does not mean they don't pay it. They have to pay it. If they think you're working when you shouldn't be, they can try to performance manage you, but overtime has to be paid. The company doesn't have any discretion there. If you don't get paid by the company for overtime, you can call me, you can even go to the Ministry of Labor for that. Yeah, but overtime always has to be paid.
I want to get to one more phone call, Lior, but first we'll get into a quick break and come back from that. In the meantime, write this number down and keep it. Same number every week we give to you, 1-888-861-4555. You prefer email, that is ask@employmentlawyer.ca. We'll get to lots more here on Ask a Lawyer on CP24.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Welcome back. This is Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. We got time for another phone call as we wind down our half hour. Again, the radio show is where we get these phone calls from. And right here in the GTA, it's News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. Lior and myself, join us, phone in, be part of the show, and you might appear on this show. At least your voice will. Anyway, let's get to that third phone call now, Lior, and talk about it.
My sister, she has well over 20 years experience in doing the job that she's been doing, trained many people on the job, trained who ended up being her replacement. The company ended up just making her life miserable. Berated her in a meeting. She got up out of the meeting and said, "I'm out of here," went outside to cool down, came back in the afternoon, and they said, "No, you quit." I think she was there for 6 years. She's 53, 54, service advisor for a car dealership.
You know, there's a lot to unpack here and a lot that this employer did wrong. Number one, if you're being bullied, harassed, mistreated in the workplace like this person seems to have been, that actually results in a constructive dismissal. And if you leave as a result of that, the law considers that to be a termination, meaning you were owed severance. You shouldn't have to suffer from harassment. You have recourse. You're not expected to just continue going to work every day when you're being mistreated in that way. The second issue, even if we forget all about that, is if you quit, quote unquote, in the heat of the moment, the law recognizes that. And if you try to come back, you have a right to come back. The company says, no, you quit. We heard you say those things half hour ago. That also becomes a termination, again, because it's in the heat of the moment. So any way you slice it, this lady's employment in the eyes of the law was terminated. She did not quit. She was bullied. There was a heat of the moment resignation, which is not really a resignation. Same with you at home. If that happens, remember, you're owed severance. Let's go now and see how much severance she's owed. Because she didn't quit, because she was terminated, we can go to pocketemploymentlawyer.ca, use our severance calculator tool. Again, it's free and anonymous, and let's see how much severance she's owed. So a service advisor, 54 years old, been there for 6 years. Company says, no, you quit. You're not getting any severance. Except you see on the bottom of the screen, that's wrong. She's owed 8 months severance. That's a significant amount of money. So all these things are things you need to know if the company's pushing you out, mistreating you, if something happened in the heat of the moment. If that's ever your situation, call me right away.
Lior, I got time to get to a quick email question. In fact, we had a very similar question last night on our radio show, if you recall. I love this question. It is a company or business exempt from Canadian employment laws if they're based in another country? What do you think?
Absolutely not. No, the laws of the province where you work is what matters. If you work in Ontario, it's the laws of Ontario that apply. Doesn't matter where the company is based out of, doesn't matter where their head office is. It's the laws of where you work, and that is good because in Ontario, we have some excellent and very helpful employment laws. They may not have the same employment laws elsewhere. So we don't care where the company is based out of when it comes to overtime, vacation pay, when it comes to severance. It's the laws of where you work. It's the only thing that matters.
We'll get to a question from your live stream you host every week here, Lior, after a short break. In the meantime, here is that number once again to reach out to Lior and his team anytime. Pick it up, grab a phone, and make that call, 1-888-861-4555. Email is ask@employmentlawyer.ca. This is Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Hang on.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
And welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here. We got a few more minutes to go. Lior does a lot of FaceTiming, and he does his meetings and stuff live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. You want to reach out at stlawyers.ca to join in. Here is the question for today, Lior. I've been off on long-term disability for nearly a year following an accident. I still can't work, but my insurer says I need to go back to work soon. My boss told me that if I'm not 100% healthy, they don't want me on staff. I'm not sure what to do. Wow.
I'm really shaking my head at this one. So let's break this down. First of all, the insurance company, it's not their call, it's your doctor's call. If you need to be off work, that's why you have disability insurance, to do what your doctor says and to pay you while you're not working. That's why you have insurance. So the insurance company can't bully you. If they try, give me a call. We have a whole team just dealing with these disability insurers that want you off their payroll. Now, with respect to the employer here, the employer has to allow you the time off to get better. They can't threaten you to get better faster. And of course, if you need accommodation, this is key, they have to provide that accommodation. Your employer can't say, only come back when you're healthy. Nonsense. If you need accommodation, you have that supported by a doctor. If your doctor says you need modified duties or modified hours, or you need to work part-time, that's what your employer has to do. They must provide that accommodation. But in the meantime, you can be off, whether it's a month, a year, or longer, if your doctor says you need to be off. Your employer should not do anything. So whether it's your insurance company trying to put pressure on you to go back to work, or your employer threatening you that if you're not coming back from disability, you will be out of a job. Either way, this is no joking matter. You have to give me a call. We can deal with both of them.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Leo. We are out of time for this week, but here's the contact as we get out the door momentarily. The phone number one more time, 1-888-861-4555. That email address you can use anytime as well is ask@employmentlawyer.ca, and that website, it's free, it's anonymous, it's a beauty. You'll have access to the severance calculator as well, pocket@employmentlawyer.ca. For any other information, cp24.com/askalawyer, and we will catch you next week right here on Ask a Lawyer. Enjoy your week. Thank you so much for tuning in.